Welcome to the Berklee Performance Center. Please take a moment to locate the nearest exit. In addition to the front doors of the theatre, emergency exits are located on the left and right of cross aisles in the orchestra and balcony. Please keep exits and aisles clear at all times and do not leave bags or personal items unattended. At this time, we ask that you turn off all cell phones and other electronic devices for the duration of the event. Thank you for your cooperation and enjoy the show.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Williams. I'm one of the faculty assistant directors for the sessions. I've announced a few of these, so you're probably getting to know us by now. Well, today we have an extraordinary clinic coming your way right now by two extraordinarily gifted musicians and teachers. David Tronzo will be playing guitar. He's one of our professors at Berklee. He's a phenomenal guitarist, extremely creative. He has developed our curriculum and extended it with some of his extended techniques for slide. And he's got a very unique perspective on things and a very popular teacher. He's traveled the world playing and teaching as well, and playing with some of the very best musicians on the planet. So it's an honor to be able to introduce him. As well, I'm going to be introducing right now Kim Perlak, who is our chair of our guitar department, another phenomenal guitarist. She's a beautiful classical player. And they do this duo that they play together where they merge sections of structured music with free sections together, and it's just the way the music moves from one section to another. It's phenomenal what you're about to hear, and they're going to share some of their insights with you of the process. So it's my honor to introduce the Perlak Tronzo and Kim Perlak and David Tronzo together. Could you please put your hand together for them?
How are we?
You know what? We might. Our friends who are the lighting people, could we get that light to be turned down so when we look at each other we don't see the stars? That would be great. Okay, that is a bright one.
Don't move.
Okay, Thank you.
Yeah. Lovely to see you all. Welcome to Guitar Sessions. I know we're in day 3 of 4, but it's great to see you here. Has it been fun? Cool.
Yeah.
Did you learn some things? Yeah.
Great.
Meet some cool people? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Not sure yet. Yes, no, maybe.
That's right. So today we wanted to take some time and talk to you about thinking about some of the things you may think are really basic to your playing that honestly, when you think about it a little bit deeper, become everything in your playing. And these are the way that tone works, the way that you make sound on the instrument, and the fundamentals of how music is built. And in our duo, like what we did, we had never tried before. In fact, one of the things I started doing I'd never tried before about 5 minutes before you walked in, and I didn't realize, like logistically, I couldn't actually physically, I need like at least a whole note to like rewrap the strings, you know? And I didn't know that, and I went for it, and I was like, oh, later I'm gonna have to figure that out, you know? So, yeah, I know, it's great, right? So we've been playing together for about 5 years now, and our goal is to kind of explore what we're doing to teach each other, and then also to build music that really relies a lot on fundamentals of guitar playing and the way you make tone. And so that's what we're gonna break down for you, and then we'll show you a couple of pieces that we've written this way.
So one of the things about the guitar, right, that sometimes goes a little underexplored is that the two hands have, very different functions, basically. They overlap a little bit, but it's technique-wise, a little different in each hand. And they each have a really distinct and important role in creating tone or texture, the sound itself. So there are textural things that happen on the fretboard depending on where you're playing, whatever it is you're playing. So even if you have a two-note idea, if you play it here, it's much more rounder and less bright. And here in the middle, somewhere kind of in the 2, and here, right? So. So those 3 tonal qualities, or 4, because of the location, give me a certain kind of expression around the idea that starts to sound, I don't know how you would say it, but it's not just voice-like, but it's sort of like it has characters. There's characteristics to it.
And then what he's doing when he puts the slide on there, that's another thing with the left hand that's creating a different timbre. So timbre is the word that we use.
Right.
We're talking about how it's the color of the note. And then likewise, if you were to play really close to the bridge, you can get it to go really bright if you play over the neck. In fact, if you can get it so your 12 frets, we could just play with those 2 notes, and you wouldn't notice right away, well, they're only using 2 notes, because that's not how your ear hears it anymore, right? And what's really interesting is so many times, especially when you come to school for music, everybody thinks about, well, do I know enough scales? Do I know enough chords? And do I know enough things? But, which is all true, like we all work on the vocabulary. As you're working on these things, you want to think about the way that you play them. Right? So part of it is placement.
Absolutely.
Right?
So, if you play with a pick, how many guitar players in this room right now play with a pick?
Great.
Look at that.
All right.
That's entirely usually the story. So think about 3 zones on the guitar. One zone for your pick is right on top of the bridge, like right as close as you can get. Right to the bridge. The next zone is somewhere between the bridge and the very top of the fretboard. So here's the same location. Here's the bridge. And then the next zone is about 15th fret. So now you have 3 completely different, what we call textural zones, right? And if while you're playing, like you can really sculpt the sound in a beautiful way. And you're just basically using these 3 areas.
How many people play acoustic or nylon string like classical guitars or play with your fingers sometimes?
Yeah.
There you go. So it's the same zones, right? But here's the thing, like when you play with your nails too, like the way that you put your right hand on there, if you're diagonal to the string, it's gonna be fat. Dip and you turn a little straight on, you have to be careful because you don't want to hurt yourself, but listen, I'm just moving my wrist.
And so diagonal to the string means you're coming at an attack angle that's...
Yeah, they might even be able to show you on the thing, yeah.
If you can zoom in.
Yeah, so that you're coming across the strings this way, like...
There you go.
Right? And now watch this, I'm going to turn. Hear the difference? So if you can't make it, like if you can't, so here's normal. Okay. Now I'm going to stay in one spot. And just change the angle of my nail, right? And it gives you the same thing. You can turn it. So it's the same zones, and then with your pick, it's the same thing, right? If you pick down to the floor, over the string, like almost like a rest stroke if you're a classical player.
Right. Pushing down.
You get the fat. If you play out, you get this sharp tone. Great thing, does anyone know who Andres Segovia was? He was a classical guitarist, right, who was one of the most well-known players of the 20th century of any style. And his rule of thumb really works. Like if you're doing something subtle, like you're playing a solo thing, then you change colors after the phrase is over. So, and then it's more powerful, it's more dramatic. So like if I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna go, it's gonna be like more dramatic than if I went, you know what I mean? Because it gives someone a moment to hear how drastically different you're playing things.
So we have these zones on the fretboard, or rather on the instrument itself, and then you have approaches in your right hand primarily,
Right.
with pick or fingers.
What about this? How many people know when you're playing dynamics? Think about this for a minute. Just think about what is the difference between playing a note loud or soft when it comes to your right hand, your pick or your fingers? What changes when you change volume? What do you do to make something louder? Okay, so someone said the amount of force you use. What is there any other answer? Okay.
So, like a muting?
Like a muting thing? Okay, anything else? I'm looking at the classical guitarist in the front row. Okay, go ahead. So what is that? Yes, that's a technique, but what does that do? Okay, so he said push more into the string. So here's the thing. The answer is weight. And it's not really tension. Watch this. This is one of my favorite things, right? So if you want a loud note, right? He knows what I'm going to do. So it's how much you push into the string before you play it. Right? If I don't want it to be very loud, I'm not going to push in very much, right? If I want it to be loud, and I could make it louder, I don't want any feedback. So I'm not changing the way I'm playing, and I'm just pushing in. If you go faster through the string, or you, like, that's what you would say when you hit it harder, faster through the string, that's attack. But you can have a lot of attack. You can have a lot of pop on it if you want it soft, too. You know what I mean? As opposed to, you know what I mean? So one of the things you're going to work on when you go home is separating attack from dynamics. So attack is the speed that your pick or your thumb or your finger comes through the string. And that's what gives it a sharp attack, or like a sound engineer would say, a point on the note. Right? Yep. And so if you want a round, fat sound that's soft, the first thing you have to think is a slow follow through. Like, think you're underwater. It's nice and easy. You're falling off the log when you fall off the string. And then your volume is all about how much weight, how much you push into the string before you release it. So if I want a fat sound that's soft, I push in, not so much, and then I let it go like I'm just falling down. You know what I mean? If I want it to be a little more, see how that sounds irritated? Like if I talk to you like that, it would be like, hey. You know, or if I did this, I'd be like, hey. You know what I mean? Like, hey man. It's like kind of like, but hey. You know what I mean? It's like, even if I didn't stop it, it would be like, phew. So that's the thing, is like, we tend to mix those things together, and you want to, but you want to do it on purpose. Mm-hmm. Right? And so those are things you want to remember about the way you play the notes that really matters.
Yeah, sounds great. That sounds right. Now this thing she says about weight on the string, you're not going this way. You're not trying to pop the string by going this way.
Yeah, show them the difference.
You're going in. So instead of doing this, I'm going in towards the guitar.
Right. Unless you're going for that.
Yeah, if I'm going for that sound, this is kind of going this direction. The other one is going into the body of the guitar.
I want to point out one other thing that you're doing. Mm-hmm. So the other thing that's important is when you're playing more than one voice at a time, you want to be able to control the consistency, right? So if you listen to David play again, you've got this slide color on the top, right? And then underneath it, you've got a bass line that's all fat and they're all the same length. And when you practice it, that's one of the reasons why everything you're doing, you could practice very, very slowly and let your ear just key into one of the parts. So would you mind playing again? Now just listen to his thumb, just the bass. You hear how nothing popped out? listen to the top.
Okay.
Yeah.
You dig?
Yeah.
So it's not about experimental music. It's not about extended techniques or new music. Kim and I have a real interest in modern 20th century classical music, and I have a lot of experience in modern, I guess what you would call modern jazz, improv and whatnot, but it's in any kind of music, you know. What allows it to sound the way it sounds, they used to call it, Ornette used to say, the sound of the sound,
Yeah.
is that attention to how well we can control the note we're playing or the notes we're playing, if there's more than one at the same time. Can they be full? Or how do you want them to sound? Do you want them to sound kind of hollow? Do you want them to be bright? Do you want to have a point on the note? Do you want it round, muted? And then volume level, like how do you control your dynamics? So if I'm playing like two-note things, if I'm playing and I want them both the same volume, if I want the top louder, okay, or I can make the bottom louder. And that's all here, basically.
Yeah, and when it gets really subtle, when you practice it, you start to sing or hear one louder in your head. That's why if you were doing that exercise when he was playing, if you followed that, even though the bass was the secondary voice, did you all of a sudden hear it louder when you were trying to? Right? And so when you practice, if you do that, your ear will start to tell your hands if they're cutting something off.
Right.
You know, here's a thing that I'm writing. Listen to this. I want that line up, and then I want in the back. So I'm gonna go. So I spent a lot of time doing this. You see what I mean? So then later it can be. So like one voice can be over the top. And so when I'm pushing in, that's gonna be a different weight than, right? And then these guys after it. And that's the kind of thing, like when David's practicing playing dyads and having the top come out, you have to focus on the top and then go so slowly so your hands start to match what you're hearing. And then nothing pops out or ghosts on you, right? And it just takes a while to let yourself breathe through it and not concentrate, because if you concentrate too hard, you'll choke it.
Right.
As you know. Everybody's like, yeah. Everybody who's tried this, right? So that's something that I think, no matter what we're talking about today, you just have to remember that everything we are practicing, we're practicing incredibly slowly, and we're trying to figure out where we're breathing and where we're not breathing.
Your breathing is key.
Yeah.
And, a lot of guitar players, we all have suffered from this, which is that we hold our breath. Mm-hmm. We hold our breath at odd times during our playing, particularly when we're trying to concentrate on something that's a little difficult to execute. And it's so much a habit, it's 100%. I've discovered that it's every guitar player I've ever taught, and every guitar player I've ever known, including myself, has had to wake up to the awareness that they're holding their breath. So guitar players tend to breathe like this. And then we play till our brain says, I think he's dying. Or, like, something's wrong. I don't know what's happening. I thought he was playing guitar, but maybe he's drowning. And then, it's like, ah. And of course, you never hold your breath after you exhale. You always hold it after you inhale. You go, and then you play. And it doesn't take more than a few seconds for your body to run out of energy with no oxygen. So then you ever notice, you're working on something and maybe it's a challenging maneuver on your instrument, and you get the first part of it kind of smoothly and then it falls apart. That's because you ran out of oxygen after a couple of seconds. So then you realize, oh, I'm not breathing. And the trick is, well, it's no trick. It's in practice, you must breathe evenly, like a normal flow of in and out that has nothing to do with the music you're playing. So you can literally do it while you're practicing modes.
Everybody breathe. He's going to play a mode and we're going to breathe.
In. Out.
Pay attention to how it feels in your chest.
In. Out. So it's about 4 notes per breath, and a little pause after the inhale and a little pause after the exhale. That's another reason why I'm encouraging often everyone to practice very slowly. And when I mean slowly, I mean your metronome never goes above 60 beats per minute. So the 60 is the fastest you practice your scales and arpeggios at. And below 50 is really a fascinating place where you can actually concentrate on all the things that you're doing, which there's more than one. So I'm working on a mode, and I'm working on that mode particular pattern, and then I have a finger assignment I want to stay consistent with. That's 2 things. Of course, the first 2 are actually breathing and relaxing, but maybe I haven't figured that out yet, right?
Right.
So they're going to be 3 and 4, but they're going to go to 1 and 2. And then I'm going to be practicing my time. So if the quarter note is here, it's just quite slow. When I first started to do this years ago, they called this the guitar player's graveyard, because everybody dies down here, They can't do it. We rush. So then I'm practicing my time, and I might be practicing rhythms. At this point, I might be doing quarter notes, right? But maybe later I'm going to do 8th notes and syncopation.
He's also practicing how much weight he's putting
Yep.
into the string with his dynamics.
Yep, weight, and dynamics, and attack, which is the speed or the follow-through. What are we up to now? That's 7 or 8.
We got timbre.
And then timbre, that's 9.
And then we also have articulation, which is part of the envelope of
Yep.
the note.
How the note is shaped, maybe what happens during the note. Do you put a little vibrato or no? Is the note fade or do you sustain it? So in reality, we're often working on up to a dozen things at the same time. And it really pays to become conscious of these things, not overwhelmed by them. How do you not be overwhelmed? The key is always practice slowly. 60 or less on the metronome. And then breathe. Be conscious that your first thing that you're practicing is how to breathe while playing anything, the simplest thing. So maybe it might happen, as it happened to me, that I had to go back to playing 2 notes in a row and breathe. You know what I mean? And just get used to doing that without interruption. And then 3 notes, right? So it was
Yeah.
kind of a back to square one feeling for a minute, but it was tremendously helpful, and it caught up very fast.
I have a question for everybody here. So, how many people feel like that seems doable? And then you think about other things that you play and you know you get tense and you hold your breath that are faster and you think, well, how does that translate into the other thing? Does anybody have stuff that like, like I always hold my breath when I play that lick, right? Okay. So number 1 is if you do this, it starts to become part of your muscle memory. And so your body will start to associate playing the guitar with breathing and being relaxed, and that will become your default. Because just like, think about it, you don't think about if you're a car driver, you don't think about how to drive anymore if you knew. But remember the first few times you're like, oh my God, and what does this do? And I don't know. But now you just do it because it's in your muscle memory, right?
I remember them when they were doing that, and I was driving in the other lane.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
just kidding.
Were you honking at them? when
Yes,
you're
I was
coming
honking
in?
wildly.
Okay. And, so that's number 1. It becomes part. The other thing you can do is if you feel like you can't get it to move over, okay, everybody's going to try this from your chair. Like you think of the lick, right? Think of the lick that you have, right? So say it's like, I don't know, David can play something fast too, but like say it's, that's pretty fast, right? Okay, so sometimes like when you think, okay, I'm going to do this, like you first do this, you're like, and then you're like, but what you want to do is, you see how
Exhale
that was
at the
even
start.
actually louder when I did it that way? So here's what you can do, is when you're practicing the thing, you're going to take, everybody do this with me, we're going to take 5 big deep breaths. So it's like in through your nose and out through your mouth. And you can close your eyes so you don't feel weird next to the person you're sitting next to. Okay, watch this. And you're just going to pay attention to how your muscles feel that connect to your arms, right? When you do this. Are you ready? Here we go. Here we go.
You can do this. You can do this.
You see how fast that was? Because like all the air comes out and then there's blood in there. Right? So what you do is you get to the part, you stop playing. You relax. You take enough time, you could go out for pizza. That's how much time you take. You take a bunch of deep breaths, you play the thing once you feel great. You go back, you play whatever section precedes it, you stop. You take a bunch of time, you relax, you breathe a bunch, then you play it. Then you start to shorten the time in between. And your body doesn't know that you're shortening the time. It's just like, oh, this is a new thing we're doing. We're taking this giant deep breath and we're relaxing everything and letting all the blood flow to our hands, like right before we play this like really fast thing. That's cool. Let's do that. Let's play that game. Then when you're in concert, all of a sudden you'll get to that lick and your body will go, and then you'll be like, and then your brain will go like, whoa, that was so hip, That's what happens. Like you trick your brain to relax instead of tense up. Does that make sense? The default mechanism is tension. So you're going to change it. And in the process of changing it, you're going to pay attention to all these beautiful colors that you can make with your physical hands on your guitar, and then it's going to open up your creativity at the same time.
Yeah, and if you're an electric guitar player, you got to start thinking about the fact that the instrument's acoustic. And actually it's breath driven. If you don't breathe, you have no sound. And everybody who plays electric guitar unconsciously tries to compensate for that with electronics and pedals. And so now you're a prisoner. And this is a fact. I'm not asking. And so pedals and effects are great when you're breathing and you have tone on your instrument already through your body, through your hands. because then they become this tone, color, palette, whatever effects, things you can't create acoustically, like flanging or, harmonizer stuff or whatever, octaver. But electric guitar is an acoustic instrument, and actually, you need to think of it. I'm still working on all the same stuff I just showed you. Right? It's still all there. And you should practice part of your day unplugged and try to get everything to sound as great as it can sound without any help from the amp or from the your gear, because your tone is not your rig. It's not your guitar either. And if you go on the road, you're going to find out something very shocking. Unless you're doing a van tour in this country, you're not playing on your gear. You think you're going to haul your rig over to the airport and fly to Japan or something and play? That's going to cost you $8,000 a trip. So I don't think so.
That's true.
So what's going to happen is you're going to play rented backline, and you're going to get every type and stripe of amp, no matter what you ask for. And if you can't get your sound on everything, you don't have a sound. That's the way that goes.
It's the same for acoustic and classical guitarists. Like, I'm a classical guitarist. I have these gorgeous concert guitars that were made by this wonderful guitar maker who became a dear friend. And I mean, we would sit there in his house and talk about Brazilian rosewood and Engelmann spruce and how everything was constructed and lattice bracing with the thing. And I went through this thing where I was like, I can only have this guitar with me at all times. And I would bring it everywhere, like on vacation. If I went away for 2 hours, I would bring it in like the extreme heat and the extreme cold. And but I would figure out, what do you do when you're trapped? And it would be like the most stressful, horrible thing. And I love that guitar. And there's something to be said for these beautiful instruments that I play. Then when I came here, we started playing together, and I started playing in halls like this, right? And you take this gorgeous thing that my friend Tom, spent a whole year building, and you'd put a microphone in front of it, and it sounded not good. You know what I mean? and because it's not set up for that. So these wonderful friends of ours from Nashville, John Knowles and Tommy Emmanuel, they were like, hey, we got this buddy, and he can measure your Tom Humphrey guitar neck, and he could make you this thing that'll just sound gorgeous on a plugged-in stage. And at first, my classical friends were like, what is that? What's that thing? It's got a cutaway. It's like a little, They were like, whoa, And then I was like, we have this wonderful classical guitarist from Paraguay, Berta Rojas, who teaches here. And the first time she saw this guitar, she goes, no, Kim. No. And then I played it, and she goes, okay, yes, okay. Because it's set up for this, and I got the right pedal, and now, and because all that matters is that you're getting your beautiful sound coming out of your instrument. And the truth is, there are times, like David said, where, I was flying to a festival in March, and my flight got canceled 9 times before I even left my house. And I called, and I was like, yeah, I'm not going to bring a guitar down. Do you have something? They're like, we'll find something. And then they find something. And you know what? It's great. It works out fine. I can do my thing on it. If it's as big as a 2x4, I have little hands, and we might go slower in some sections, but okay.
I witnessed something a few years ago at the MFA here in Boston, where Debashish Bhattacharya, who's one of the greatest Indian classical slide guitar players, and they play lap style on these extremely customized, one-of-a-kind guitar vinyas, and they're made, each instrument is its own special universe. There's no copies. And he flew to the United States. He lives in Vancouver now. And he flew here to start his tour in Boston, and the guitars flew somewhere else. And he got into Boston at 3 in the afternoon, and he made a few phone calls, and he got somebody to bring him an archtop jazz guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And he played the concert on that, and he sounded like Debashish Bhattacharya. You know, and I know this guy for 35 years. He sounded exactly like he's always sounded, and he didn't have any of his instruments, right? So clearly, that was an example because his thing is acoustic, microphone, and it was, you know, really intense. I have something I want to read to you. It's kind of a food for thought question. Maybe you can write this down for yourself and think about it. Whether you think it's cool or not now, trust me, baby, this will be of worth to you at some point. Here's the question. Can you shift your focus away from your learned habits that your identity is invested in and focus on fundamentals, single notes, intervals, and the production of sound? If you want to record this, please do. I'll read it again. Go ahead, get your phones out. You always have them in your hand anyways. I don't know what the heck you think you're doing, not holding your phone. Ready? Can you shift your focus away from your learned habits that your identity is invested in and focus on fundamentals, single notes and intervals, and the production of sound? Keep it going. Keep recording. You can start by taking away the context, the familiar style comfort zones, and let yourself experience receiving the basic making of sound on your instrument. And notice how your instrument works. Receiving is a very interesting concept here. Like when you play, you're not producing every moment. At the same time, you are also relaxing enough to receive what you're doing. Now, who thinks about that? It seems when you're playing, there's no time to think about that. But that's actually a thing that's happening at the exact same time. So while I'm playing anything that I'm playing, I can be in a state of receiving this almost like a listener who's not playing the guitar at that point. And I'm in both states at the same time. I'm the chooser and the producer, and I'm also the receiver. And the production part, the chooser part, I don't even have to worry about because I've worked so hard on that. That's almost now second nature. And I'm sure that's already happening for you somewhere in your music playing. You feel that already. So the producer part's not the one to focus on so much. Try focusing when you play on the receiving part, being in receiving mode.
Think about this as he's playing. What if you thought of substituting the word receiving for the word expression? There's a certain pressure that we all put on ourselves when we say, oh, I'm being expressive, right? What if you're receiving the sound and really listening to it? And then the expression just becomes this natural thing that happens because you're doing that while you're making it. So it's not about you. It's about the music that you're creating. And it takes away that judgment of yourself in that moment when you're trying to make something. You can just listen to what you're doing and do more or less of that.
Hey,
Yeah, go ahead.
it's 4:59. Does anybody have a question? Yes. Yes. Oh,
That's a good question.
well, it's interesting. Okay. My answer to that question, and we'll both answer that question. On the way to cultivating those two simultaneous, seemingly opposite states of being, I had to let go of a few linguistic concepts.
Yeah.
People find these very shocking. The first thing I had to start to get out of my thinking was the idea of like and dislike. So it doesn't matter whether I like something or dislike it. So then I start to want to let go of like and dislike, so I'm not even trying to play with that anymore. It's gone. No like, dislike. Now the interesting thing here is if I get rid of like and dislike in relation to music and me, what's left? Anybody have any thoughts about that? What would be the motivation to continue to play if like and dislike are off the table?
Create the actual music without distracting yourself from what you think, how you to get rid of your learned habits.
Yeah, basically, yep, now you're starting to become more of a conduit for the music, right? So the realization is the music is not actually mine being made by me, but it is actually me being a facilitator of it, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's not exactly channeling, but it's close. It's sort of like surfing. I mean, it sounds kind of like, philosophical. But surfers are great, if you've ever surfed. I live up in New Hampshire, they surf in the North Atlantic, even in the wintertime. It's great. And you don't get to pick the wave, You just get to get on the board and respond. Music is just like that to me. Okay?
Yeah, for me, I know exactly what it means because I studied the classical guitar for so long, and everything that I can do interpretively is in context, right? So in the beginning of when we were playing together, it was like, what about these kind of sounds or these techniques? And it's like, well, that's in that piece, right? Or that's in that piece. And then David said, well, what do you do in the piece when you just want to change it and do your own thing? And I was like, yeah, that's not the way of our people. We don't do that. And so for me, he said, but you've studied this for so long, right? It is in you. It's like your instincts are in there. You can have the context of a beautiful piece of music, but you don't need it. You could just choose your own notes and do these things and make them sound beautiful, So this is a good example. So I was doing these things where you have a bass line and a harmonic.
By the way, I want to come back to those things and show them what they
Yeah,
are.
we're going to show you what they are, and we have a piece that has a bunch of different stuff. We'll play more things, but I see when he would play, one of the things I love is that the different color of the bass note and the top note, and I thought, well, I don't have that in my playing, but I have this where I could put a harmonic on the top, and then have, how cool is that? That's in a bunch of our repertoire. I know that the person in the front is the classical guitar, so okay, and I'm like, oh, Spanish Dance No. 5, arrangement, and I'm like, well, what if I just made up my own things? And the first time I did it, I was hyperventilating, will the gods of classical guitar be like, oh my God, you're playing in E flat and a B together, that's horrible. And I thought, well, I think those sounds are really beautiful. I'm going to start sticking them together. And so for me, it was like taking things out of the context of a specific piece and asking myself, how would I want to do it if I could choose the notes more freely? And then for me, if I think about how they sound and how I'm making them and the sound that's being creative, it takes away the incredible anxiety I have about whether or not what I'm choosing is good. You know what I mean? As a person who's more new to improvisation, I think it's okay, Right. But if I can focus on the sound part, then then that's the good thing, and then that stops it being also overshadowed again by the technique, right?
Now, Kim and I were, discussing the topic for this, or topics for this clinic, and one of the things that she phrased so beautifully is kind of an answer to your question, your initial question. And it's going to sound like, ooh, but it's real stuff. This is real stuff. You have to be willing to risk the terror of vulnerability to bring out your true deep instincts when you play music. If you really wanted to have this component. It's a terror ride. That's the doorway. They, in Buddhism, they call it the flaming doorway. It's a doorway you have to go through, but it's on fire, and everybody goes, oh, I don't know if I'm going to do that. But the terror of vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Just to like calm down and not do anything that's easy or flashy or whatever that you do to get away from having to stop and sort of maybe play nothing. Obviously, there are strategies to all this stuff, and if you can find the right people to help you with this, it's really important. We've been at music for a long time. 2020 is the beginning of my 50th year of playing this instrument. Half a century is quite a long time. And I've been gifted to be around some of the most profoundly deep teachers, even though I did not go to school per se. I studied formally, and for the last 5 years I've been studying with Kim.
Yeah, and I've been playing the guitar since 1985, and I've been studying with him. So this is a lesson swap. This is how it started. We just saw each other in the hallway. I was like, oh, there's all these things that you can do that I can't do, and he said the same,
Yeah.
And I just wanted to point out that you don't get over that feeling of anxiety. We did this for a year before we finally admitted to each other that sometimes we would just go home and just feel just despair. I'd look at this and I'd be like, I took out so many student loans and you know what I mean? And I don't know what to do. And then, you know what I mean? And then one day we were doing something and I was like, is it hot in here? And he was like, no. And I was like, well, you're sweating. And he was like, but I'm gonna get the note to be loud, but with no attack. It's just, that's what we chose. We chose this instrument that doesn't have an end to it.
I played 45 years and developed a bunch of, skills with my right hand, and then I went back to school for my picking for my right hand.
Yeah.
And I basically started over 5 years ago.
Yeah, and I started over with understanding the fingerboard 5 years ago because in order to create my own music, and then I started writing stuff I had never composed before, and that opened up all the doors, right? And then it feeds back to the stuff that you have done for a long time. And if you can just think of yourself, you're just always a student, it just starts to get more comfortable.
Yeah. Cool.
You want to play something more?
Want to play the tune?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Kim Perlak, Dr. Kim Perlak, Chair of the Guitar Department, Berklee College of Music.
Professor David Tronzo. Great. If anyone has any final questions, we can answer them. And do you want to,
Yes.
while they're doing that, show them what that piece looked like?
Yes, could you
We're just
put
gonna
up the
show you just for a
score
second.
of the piece we just played?
Yeah.
That's what we just played.
Yeah. And so, you know, we had big ideas about fitting a ton of stuff in here because we could literally talk to you about this forever, and especially if you had your instruments. This is a class that we teach 2 classes on this material. One is called Spontaneous Composition, which focuses starting on the improvisation side. And the other one is Modern Writing Ensemble that starts on the comp side. So you can kind of see what we did up there, and then we play with the sections.
Everything that we just played is based in this. And part part of the improvisation that we do in this piece is with the actual structural stuff that you see written. We play with how we're moving it around or repeating it or whatever. And part of the improvisation is actual solos, very typical kind of solo over a background. We each had shared those a few times. And then we played the unison written material, particularly these 2 lines that you see with the double stops there. Not this on the bottom of those. So that was this. Sorry.
Yep. I mean, one of the great things that we thought about is how cool do our different guitar sounds together, right? And because it's unconventional, it gives you freedom. You want to do something different. The first time we've ever played, and for our colleagues, we do a concert once a year where we play for each other. It's the only people in the audience there are 60 guitar teachers at Berklee, and we play for each other. And we got up to play, and David said, so we were working on music that we're writing for our duo, and our friend in the front row goes, really? Like, really loud. We're like, yeah. But
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, but our guitar sounds so different. We thought, okay, that makes us think about tone, right? And then this is different for me. When we talk about, hey, what are you working on when you're practicing? Now it's like, oh, I'm working on my intervals. You know, I'm working on my dyads. I'm working on this thing I want, this sound where I want this harmonics to sound this thing, you know, or I'm putting like fourths and seconds and sixths together to get these chords. We started calling them cathedral chords. Oh, that sounds so cool. You know, I'm working on polytonal writing, or I'm working on triads. You know, I used to say I am working on the A section of this piece, which is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but I didn't break it down so that I could take that stuff and then use it for myself in different ways, right? So everybody, you know, you're working on your tunes, take those modes and spend some time playing with them and creating your own stuff, and then watch how that affects your other style, what you started with. Watch that.
Does anyone have any questions now that we've played?
Yeah.
Yes.
A question about the breathing that you talked about, trying to breathe normally as if you, as so that it's completely attached to the music. I assume that would
Yes.
be a stepping stone.
Absolutely. That's the primary thing.
Yes. I was wondering how to connect that and kind of like reconcile that idea with wanting to breathe along with the music
Well,
for
you-
expression.
Yeah, so what I would do is, so I'm practicing even that first line, right? So it goes, that's like, I could say that's the first half, right? So I would breathe, I would do that 5 breaths exercise, you know, and then I would wait. So I go, right, after I had it, and then I would relax. And then I would breathe, and then I would go, oh wait, sorry. I wasn't ready. So that's the second half, right? So then I would think, I would just start getting it down, relax completely. Right? So then as the time gets shorter in between, you can actually count it. You could go 1, 2, 3, 4. 3, 4, first one. Oh, sorry. 1, 2, 3. Right? So I just keep getting it down so that when I get to because my goal is right, so that there is no space, right? You gotta you put space in, you breathe, you relax, you take space away. So then you can see me, like if I was on the screen, you could see I just breathe now because I put the breath in. We can talk about it more after too, but you have to insert the breath physically. Does that make sense?
I want to say that this piece, is a piece that I wrote to start,
Yeah.
kind of to start off the duo. And most of the ideas in it, virtually all of them, are things that have come out of my improvisational language. So I've played all these kinds of types of phrases for eons. And so my experience is I don't remember when it was a thing I had to work on, because the truth is that these phrases come from longer soloistic ideas.
If you guys can put him back up there,
Huh?
I want you on the screen. Watch him breathe.
It's my fourth breath
See,
in.
you can see him breathing.
Right? And I'm just breathing like,
Yeah. You start to pay attention when you're not, right? And then if you could put the score back up. Look at this. Like I said this last year and it got quoted on Facebook, so I'm going to say it again. You never graduate from intervals, right? Like we're all doing all this complicated stuff. This part, which I dream of, which I love. I can't believe he gets to play it. Because this is like the coolest thing. I mean, he gets a darker tone than me, and so I gotta give it to him. But, you know, when's the last time you just sat and played sixths and sevenths
yeah.
and thought, like, how beautiful are those intervals? Or like, play seconds and be like, that's a major second. You know what I mean? You just we don't let ourselves do that. And yet, if you did, gosh, how pretty is that?
You know, the nature of intervals are such that when they're isolated, consonance and dissonance is a completely relative thing. So if you're playing a lot of sevenths, major sevenths, you get used to hearing them. They're no longer dissonant.
Isn't that great? There's some fourths.
Right? If we compare those to thirds, and now there's fourths. After a while, you can actually get, if you play a lot of so-called dissonant intervals, then you put a third in there, the third sounds dissonant. Because it's all about your brain putting together sets. They go, oh, that's like that, okay. That's the same, yeah, okay, we're cool. And you put a third in, it goes, whoa. And that's what our experience of dissonance is, consonants, right?
Right.
But you can flip it, you can make dissonance consonants.
If you let yourself improvise, choosing notes freely and just being, or just if you can't start, like sometimes it's hard to start. If you just say, I'm just going to play intervals. Just start playing them and listen to them. And you start to let yourself get sensitive and use your tone and your color and all the things we talked about in the beginning to work with that. Then imagine what it would do when you're playing a jazz standard or a classical piece. Imagine what would happen because your ear is like, oh, like, you know. Then when you're interpreting counterpoint later, it's like, oh, now your ear's like clued in to all these little things and what your hands can do to make them come alive. That'd be a nice way to start instead of like, you know, shooting a cup of coffee and like trying to play your modes as fast as you can. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like you could still do that, but like what would be nice is if you made some beautiful sounds,
Yeah.
controlled them, you know? You have to be able to be yourself on purpose.
Yeah, there
That's
you
what
go.
one of my teachers told me. This is how you learn to do that.
I think we're getting
Yeah.
to
I
the
think
end.
we are. Any last questions, anybody?
Yes, sir.
So I heard what you said about like and dislike.
Yes.
How about bad, good,
Yes, all of it.
and frustration? Plateaus and frustration.
Okay,
So-
plateaus and frustration.
Here's something that I got great benefit from. Many, 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 many decades ago, I was advised not only to get rid of like and dislike, good and bad. My favorite quote was from Duke Ellington. He said, "There's good music and bad music, and I like them both." But you know, it would really, I said, "Oh, that's great, I got it." But somebody said to me, stop using the words difficult or hard and easy. Like, what's the easiest way to do this? Or, oh, this is going to be hard. Oh, this is hard, this thing I'm working on. And they said, for difficult or hard, substitute the word unfamiliar. And for easy, substitute the word familiar. And so now whenever you're working on something that's not yet familiar, it's just unfamiliar. And each moment you work on it, it becomes slightly more familiar. In not necessarily a linear way. And you kind of go on this ride with your own learning style and whatever, you know, all the elements that fall into place, those mystical things and physical things. But it's unfamiliar and familiar. So somebody says, well, what do you know? I said, well, I don't know anything, but I can demonstrate things that I'm very familiar with. And when I go to demonstrate something I'm a little unfamiliar with, you know, it might be a little dicey, but we're okay with the risk.
And that's a good point too, because I think sometimes there's this myth of like the players that you love, that you listen to, oh, they're so comfortable, and it's so easy for them, and it's not easy for me, so there's something wrong with what I'm doing. I don't think anybody's comfortable. I think there are people, the more you do this, you become more comfortable with being uncomfortable. And it doesn't freak you out anymore. You know, they say that nerves, when I went and talked to someone about, at one point I had some nerves when I was in grad school, and they said, well, there's two parts of it. There's the natural feeling of adrenaline. And for each of us, that causes different physical symptoms. For some people, it's cold hands. My nose runs when I'm nervous. And then your body reacts to the natural physical symptom, and then you're nervous about being nervous, and then that's where it goes. That's where the spiral down starts. And if you can just get comfortable with, well, I'm going to have some adrenaline because that's natural, and when that happens, my nose runs, then you put a little Sudafed in your bag, a little antihistamine, you take that, or you put a hand warmer. I had a friend who baked a potato, stuck it in his suit jacket pocket, and he played recitals with a potato in his pocket so that his hands would be warm. And then, so it's the same thing with music that you're unfamiliar with. It's like, well, now you just know what to do. You practice slowly, you practice breathing, you give yourself a break, you know.
Back when I was on the, I'll just say this and we'll, I think, start to wrap.
Yeah.
Back when I was on the road a lot, you know, years ago, I was on the road constantly. When I would have a break and I'd be home, my wife would watch me. At 5 o'clock in the evening, I would get a shot of adrenaline because that's sound check.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to get amped up for the night, the show, because you know, you got to really be able to focus. And I would get this, and I'd be home and I'd go, I think I'm going to take out the garbage again. She'd be like, you just took out the garbage. Yes. I needed something to do. And it was my body just going, yeah, it's 5 o'clock, let's go. You know?
Yeah.
It's kind of
Yeah,
wild.
and then we started being really honest with each other. It's nice to have a friend in this, you know, just find a friend that, so like if I go play a solo concert and I start to feel my nerves, I text him and I'm like, oh, it's coming. And he was in New York playing a concert and he was like, okay, here it
Saturday.
comes. And I'm like, you know, you're not crazy.
Yep.
You're not a jerk. You're gonna be okay. And he's like, yeah, I know, but you know, this is the worst time for me. And so you just need someone to remind you.
Yeah.
That
was Saturday night. I was walking
Yeah,
down 7th
that's
Street
right.
in Brooklyn, and Kim
texting
was
me.
texting.
Yeah, I'm like, it's cool, man. You know, like, don't leave town. I actually texted, don't leave town. You're going to feel good in 2 hours, you know. So I think, but all this stuff really helps because ultimately, you know, once you start to get interested in what you're doing again, the full quote that I said about being yourself is, you have to learn to be yourself on purpose or you are left to the vagaries of the moment of inspiration.
That's right.
Yeah, I thought it was from some deep literature because my guitar teacher told me that, and I looked all over for it, and he finally admitted after 20 years that it's from a movie called The Color of Money with Paul Newman and Tom Cruise, which is like a pool hustler movie that's really cheesy, but that's a great line, whoever wrote that line.
And on that note, we're going to thank you
Yeah,
for coming
thank
to
you
this
so
wonderful
much.
clinic
Thank you all.
and making it a great afternoon.
And tonight, Freddie Bryant is going to play 5 different guitars, and the incredible Bill Pierce, who is a legend of the saxophone, is joining him, so you have to come back. Come on back.
Thank
Thank you all. That was great.